William, hopefully your favorite videographer from Two Hats Publishing. I welcome you to another Two Hats special of community events. Let's look in and see what's really happening.
Alternate plan. I actually have a lot of questions about the alternate plan itself as we speak, but I think my purpose for being here from the education standpoint is what can we do as a community to really think about how we as a community work together to try to lift up our schools. There's been a lot of conversation about concrete and toll roads and roads in general, and I believe ultimately we need to really make sure that we're focused on revitalizing our urban core and ensuring that our children within the urban core have a high quality education. If we can put dollars in that place in the education ecosphere, I think we should be doing that and working as a community in that area.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Sounds good.
Is it on now? Great. Guys, thank you guys so much for coming out today. I want to talk a little bit about why we're here on a Saturday afternoon. 3 weeks ago, Senator Royce West was kind enough to hold a forum where he invited the public to come out and learn more about the proposed Trinity Toll Road Parkway, depending on your level of support. And had a presentation that provided the facts and some opinions on the merits behind needing that toll road parkway. And at the end of the event, it was clear that a majority of those that were present actually opposed the toll road. And to Senator West's credit, what he did is he asked those who were against the toll road to come up with a better alternative, which is fair. Because the truth is there are challenges that the city's facing, that Southern Dallas is facing. And we can't just say no to one proposed solution. We really need to have a good idea to address it. And I know there's a lot of people who have said, well, I'll tell you what a better alternative to the toll road is. Do nothing. But the fact is there are a lot of things that need to be improved. We need to address transportation, housing, education, and economic employment. At the end of the day, what's truly going to grow South? What's truly going to grow our city? It's jobs. Does the toll road address that? Does it even impact congestion? That's why we're here. So, Tony, why are we here? We're here for Dallas. We all care about our city. We care about our neighborhoods. We care about making a difference. And I think in order for us to accurately come up with the ways in which we can truly make an impact, we need to understand the lay of the land, the state of our city, the state of Southern Dallas. Now, Senator West gave us 2 weeks to come up with an alternative to the toll road, which was not a lot of time. The good news is he did give us 4 weeks to solve global poverty. So for next week, if you guys want to come back here, we're going to tackle that issue. So with that, I want to introduce George Battle III. George is the director for the Zip Code Connection, an organization working with the Methodist Church that is addressing poverty in 75210 and 75215. And we're going to go back and forth and really talk about the state of our city and the state of Southern Dallas so we can understand what it is we're up against and what we need to address. So with that, let's talk about our city. So the city of Dallas is struggling. And if you're reading articles in the news, it's difficult to actually understand the extent to which we're struggling. Oftentimes, our political leadership for our city is conflating the city of Dallas with DFW. Everyone's talking about, Dallas booming. In reality, Dallas isn't. From 2000 to 2010, Dallas County lost over 200,000 jobs. From 2000 to 2010, the city of Dallas only grew by 9,000 people. Put that in perspective, Fort Worth grew by 200,000. And so looking at our city, recognizing the fact that the mean income's actually been dropping steadily since the 1960s, where it was around mid $65,000, now it's under $45,000. And the challenge is, if you don't see it, if you're not aware of it, if you're not surrounded by it, you don't recognize it. So the gap between the wealthy and the poor is getting bigger. You know, I live in Lakewood. I live in northern Dallas, northeastern Dallas, and prices are going up. So the idea that our city is struggling, that things are getting worse, that doesn't resonate with me. I don't see it. But the truth is it is. And a lot of that's happening south of I-30. And so with that, I wanted George to kind of walk us through and talk about the state of southern Dallas. Because as we talk about the toll road, I think it's important for us to recognize that this is a project that's really been embraced by a lot of the leadership in southern Dallas as a way that we can truly address the challenges that residents in southern Dallas are facing. But I can't speak to those issues. I don't live in southern Dallas. George does. So George?
And so when we talk about the toll road, and oftentimes when council persons and even in Senator West's argument, he spoke about the toll road will be helpful because of jobs, it will decrease congestion, and then we've also heard this argument about justice. But when you look at southern Dallas, where I am a resident, what you see is that of that 9,000 he spoke of this increase in population in Dallas, only 10% of that makes up of an increase in South Dallas or Southern Dallas, excuse me. When you speak about the growth or the lack of growth, right, happening in Southern Dallas, in Dallas as a whole, what you have to think about is that there was a 51% decrease, rather, in public transportation. And then when you hear that number, you think, oh, that's good. That means more people bought cars or more people are driving. That's not the case in Southern Dallas. In fact, by 9%, there was an increase in commute from Southern Dallas residents going to their jobs. That's 6% more than the whole of Dallas and their commutes to jobs. In fact, Southern Dallas is considered to be a low vehicle access location. What that means is that there's only one car per household of 100 households. So one has to ask the question, what do you mean by providing jobs by getting on this toll road? Or what do you mean by decreasing congestion or even justice, right? Some other stats, when you think about transportation or employment, right? The extreme poverty rate went up by 39% in Southern Dallas. It didn't decrease. When you think about the labor force, it decreased by 5% over the same time span that Matt was talking about, 1999 to 2012. When you think about education, there is 31% of the population in Southern Dallas is at or below a high school degree level. Less than 49% less of the population in Southern Dallas has a four-year degree or more. When we speak about education, 5%, there was a 5% increase in high school dropout rates in the same time span. Not an increase, it's been dropping as far as high school rates. The median income for households has dropped by 20% in Southern Dallas compared to Dallas as a whole. The home value of Southern Dallas has dropped by 10%. The vacancy rate just within this area of South Dallas Fair Park has increased by 38%. And I actually can see that in my own street, literally in my street of Harrell, on my block. There's a vacant house the whole stretch of Harrell Street and Cedar Crest. On the other end, there are There are some residents, some seniors, but on my own street, I can see that this vacancy rate. So one has to ask, what is the real issue when we speak about the toll road? Is it really a road that we need in order to create more jobs in southern Dallas, to decrease the congestion, or even to provide justice to southern Dallas? And I think that's why we're here today, because it's really about the jobs initiative. That's really what we're talking about, is bringing jobs to southern Dallas. So that way people can access those jobs and not have these long commutes. So that way that we can have better housing, or reason even for better housing, a reason for grocery stores, a reason for safe and secure neighborhoods. That's really what we're talking about, is a jobs initiative, not another road initiative.
You know, one of my favorite tweets that I've seen retweeted a lot recently is when this whole debate about the toll road was really picking up. Wiley H. Dallas, I don't know if you all are familiar with him, but he tweeted out, "Grow south, go north." And I think that kind of message of, are we really going to grow the southern sector by investing and building ways in which for those residents to leave the southern sector? Is that what's going to build the South? Or are we going to build the South by actually bringing jobs back there, creating more livable, walkable neighborhoods, investing in education, housing, transportation in a way that truly adds value to those that need it? But I think it's also important that we recognize that those who are advocating for the toll road, you know, I know there's a lot of people out there who think that they don't have the best of intentions. They're trying to pull over a fast one to make lots of money on the side. I don't think that's really the case. I think it's just an issue of being misguided. And I think that's important. I don't think we can really challenge the intentions of those that are back in the toll road. We just really need to lay out what it is that people are suggesting as to why they think it makes sense. And let's go through point by point and really understand whether or not it's making a difference and how we as residents can make that difference. Now, I know there's a lot of text up here, which is difficult to read, but this kind of chronicles the debate. And this debate over the toll road's been happening for 17 years now. Now, I think it's really important that we all recognize, oftentimes when elections come up, you have candidates that do their best to articulate the challenges that the district's facing, and then do their best to represent why they have the best experience to actually tackle those challenges. When in truth, so few people actually come to the table and say, vote for me because here's how we can solve these challenges. They don't come to the table with a game plan of what we can do to address these issues. And so we tend to vote for people, vote for someone instead of voting for something, some solution. And that's a challenge with this toll road. You know, the reasons given for why we should build this toll road, they've changed. You know, in 1998, they talked about parks and recreation, flood protection, transportation. These were the reasons given of why we needed to build this. Years later, in 2007, those issues changed again. It was about business and real estate development. It was required to fix the Mixmaster. We can't finish the Pegasus project if we don't build this toll road. We can't fix SM Right if we don't build this toll road. All of those claims have been proven to be untrue. Look at the Mixmaster now. Look at Pegasus project. It's moving forward. It doesn't have the funding it needs, but it's moving forward. Look at SM Right. We learned a few weeks ago at the Senator West event that SM Right is moving forward regardless of the Trinity toll road. So what reasons are they giving now? Well, now there's two main issues that are oftentimes regurgitated in all the editorials: congestion and economic justice. So let's break those down. Let's talk about congestion. The idea that traffic's getting bad was one of the things brought up at Senator West event. Michael Morris, who runs the COG, who's been in that position for 25 years and largely is responsible for developing the regional transportation strategy and investment for North Texas, said that he projects traffic to double in the next 20 years. Well, Patrick Kennedy had just written an article in D Magazine where he debunked that theory. He actually showed how in some of the major corridors over the last 5 years, traffic's actually gotten better not to say it's good, but looking at those numbers, seeing that traffic's actually dropping, how can you project that in 20 years' time that traffic's going to double? And so we asked him that at the Senator West event. And what Michael Morris said was one of the aspects of their equation is they look at where jobs currently are and where people are, and that's what largely dictates where they build roads and why. The challenge with that theory and that approach is you're never going to work to invest and build jobs back in southern Dallas. You're going to keep creating ways in which for people to leave southern Dallas and other pockets of the city. And so this whole idea that we're exporting jobs out of southern Dallas instead of bringing those jobs back, that's the philosophical difference between those that are advocating for the toll road and investing in these roads, and forget for the moment that they're building a massive toll road in the floodplain of the largest river in Texas. We'll get back to that. But that idea that we need these roads to actually address congestion and address traffic, it's not the case. Not only does it not solve congestion, what we'll actually discover and what we've recently learned, it makes it worse.
In fact, I won't do this as great as justice as Patrick would, but when you think about the theory of induced demand, and this idea that when you build wider roads, more lanes, it doesn't actually decrease congestion. It actually increases traffic, right? That is a part of the idea of the theory. In fact, though, there's a variable that I think we don't think about. If the goal is to get the working class, the poor, their jobs faster by creating this toll road, that's almost oxymoron or ridiculous to think about, right? The fact that someone that's a part of the working poor class, someone whose income is over 60% of that income is being used for food, rent, or housing, right, is going to then also pay a toll to get to that job. It makes no sense at all. It rather, in my mind, I would believe someone would be looking for the free roads or the freeways or the roads that exist that are free to get to those jobs, which if we put this money towards a new toll road, that leaves no money to go towards fixing the current grid we have, the current freeways we have. So that's what we're talking about when we say, or rather when he speaks about debunking this idea that this decreases congestion.
Did anyone read the Brandon Formby piece in the Dallas Morning News a few days ago that talked about the federal study that actually showed that not only is the Trinity toll road not going to make congestion better, but on every major roadway around the Trinity toll road, congestion is going to get worse. And that's hilarious, but I mean, it's sad. It's funny because, it flies in the face of the very reason that is justifying doing this in the first place. And so when we talk about congestion, we also talk about whether or not this is truly an economic justice project. I mean, if in fact we're building this toll road to provide access and transportation options to people who need it most, the fact that we're either going to charge them to use a road, and for those who can't afford to use the toll road, we're going to force them to drive on streets that otherwise would have better traffic, but because of this road, it's going to get worse. I mean, this is the one thing you could do that truly disregards the working poor. It's a lose-lose proposition. Either you pay more to use a road, or you have to deal with more traffic because of this road. And so we talk about this being an economic justice project, and the fact is, it's not. It makes congestion worse. It flies in the face of everything we need to do to provide more access, more opportunity for people that are trying to get from one part of the city to another. And so, looking forward, this gets to the heart of the question and the heart of the challenge. So if not the toll road, then what? Well, let's define success. And right now we're passing out the Dallas Morning News article that breaks down the federal study and shows how it's actually getting worse. But let's talk about what's actually needed to make a difference. What can we do as a city? And this goes back to the fact that we can no longer simply rely on our candidates, on our elected officials to come up with these solutions. As residents, it's incumbent upon us to come up with these ideas that can either be scaled or piloted depending on the stage of development. And so at the end of the day, what are we trying to do? Well, we're trying to bring jobs back, and we're trying to improve the quality of life. And that, when we talk about these alternative solutions, we want to improve congestion. We want to actually address economic development. And the way we're going to do it is with a jobs program. So that's what we wanted to lay out here today. And I know that in the way in which it was framed, we talked about this being an alternative plan. The truth is, this isn't a plan. This is a process. And it's a process that we want to engage and involve the public, because that doesn't happen enough. Too rarely is there actually an opportunity where we can engage in a conversation with thought leaders, with elected officials, with residents, and truly get to the heart of why we're doing what it is we're doing and how we can make a difference. Because it's going to take all of us. And so when we think about what's actually required to create the conditions conducive to not just expanding the jobs we have, but attracting the jobs that currently aren't here, it's going to take all of us. And we're going to have to address a lot of these different issues. And so what George is going to represent and lay out is exactly what this jobs initiative is. And the jobs is an acronym, each letter representing a piece of the puzzle that we need to collectively address.
And actually, I think that is what our panel is for, to touch on every one of these letters that represents truly how do we bring jobs back to Southern Dallas? How do we, at the same time, deal with the congestion that is a visible reality, right, for Dallas? But then also, how do we truly do well, or do right, rather, with South Dallas Fair Park and the Southern Dallas area just-wise? So, I don't know if Matt started working on this acronym because of the fact that he knew I was a preacher and asked me to do it, but I love it. The fact that we have, we're going to talk today with the panel about transportation and how can we, besides you creating a toll road, do something about the current transportation need we have, about housing. You just heard some of the statistics as it related to housing for Southern Dallas. How do we address that? How do we address the educational needs? How do we address the justice issues happening, or not happening rather, in Southern Dallas? How do we build upon opportunities, all of the assets, when you think about the Trinity Forest, when you think about Fair Park, when you think about Southern Dallas and all of its history? How do we actually accentuate that rather than continue to suppress it? How do we build upon business development in South Dallas, but also Dallas locally, rather than trying to send it north? And then also, how do we continue to grow a safe and secure Southern Dallas when we speak about all of these things? It's called their jobs initiative.
And so with that, we actually want to bring up our panel. We are really fortunate to have such tremendous thought leaders in each of these issue areas to start this conversation. And that's what this is. This is the beginning of a conversation. So with that, kind enough to have Miguel Solis, President, Dallas Board of Trustees, DISD. We have Patrick Washington, who is the President of the Fair Park Merchants Association. We got Angela Hunt, former City Councilwoman and the original advocate who started this when it all began. And of course, Scott Griggs, City Council person all-star of the decade. One other thing I want to say before we bring up our moderator. What we're going to have is a conversation about these issues and show how they're interconnected. Once this is done, we want to open this up to a Q&A. And what we've realized, once we've seen actually who showed up today, is we have a wealth of institutional knowledge that's in this room that's not necessarily on this stage. And so as questions are asked, I don't want to limit those who are just on the stage to provide answers. I encourage those of you who are here to build off those questions and contribute your own answers. This idea of this is a fight that's been going on for a while. I mean, so long that we've actually had kind of the messaging and mantra that's been taken from one group and stolen from another. I mean, do you guys remember the Save the Trinity? Right? Save the Trinity was the 1998 call to action. And then in 2007, when URLs were far more widely used, it was used by the pro-toll roaders who took Save the Trinity and made that their mantra. And so you had these signs, Save the Trinity, vote no. And of course, voting no meant defeating the very bill that would have stopped the road. And so we want to take that back. I mean, that's an important, I think, aspect of all of this, is at the end of the day, we're not just coming up with solutions to address what the toll road would otherwise solve, but we're trying to save one of the most important natural assets our city has. And so after this panel, when we engage in the Q&A, I hope you guys keep that, take that into consideration and recognize that we're not going to solve anything today, but hopefully we're beginning something. And so with that, Amber Sims, would you mind joining us? Amber is the Director of Community Engagement for LIFT. LIFT stands for Literacy Instructing for Texas. Dramatic pause, very important. Amber, thank you so much.
Well, I just want to thank you all for being here today on not just a Saturday, but a beautiful Saturday. It is absolutely beautiful outside. So the fact that you all are here with us just speaks to the importance of what is going on today. And so, we just like to borrow your time here for a little bit to talk about what's going on in Dallas and what is so important to our city. And, just thanking our panelists that are here in advance and for the wealth of knowledge that we have here in the audience. And this is something that really speaks to what we have the ability to do in Dallas. And collectively, I think for so long we trust processes. And so often we've been fed things, and I think it's okay to question things. And I think it's okay for the city to say if something hasn't necessarily been done without our opinion, it's okay to say not without us. And that's what this conversation is about. So thank you all for being here. So to kick off this conversation, I want to start with my friend Scott here. Scott, I want to, I know that we've been talking about the merits of the Trinity Toll Road. So from a transportation perspective, if the Trinity Toll Road isn't the answer, we know that we have huge traffic problems in Dallas. How do we address congestion?
Well, first off, thank you for putting this together. It's great to be here. I would say what is the solution for our congestion? One big component of it is Project Pegasus, which is fixing the Mixmaster. As many of you know, the Mixmaster, most of the backup happens around downtown because of the canyon. That's I-30, just south of downtown. It's only 6 lanes. And so you look at the roads that go into it, they're 14 lanes, 7 each way. And then you get to the canyon, you have 3. And so you have 7 lanes go into 3, so you have a bottleneck. So Project Pegasus, which needs to be our transportation priority, balances the system. So if you're driving through the city of Dallas, 7 lanes stays the whole 7 lanes throughout. It doesn't drop down to 3 lanes. So that's a big component of it. The other component's DART. And we're going to have some opportunities coming up as policymakers to redo how DART does its buses and its transportation system. There's really in DART, a big city like this, like Dallas, if you're dependent on DART, depending on a bus to get to work, it can take you 2 hours with all the transfers and waiting. And so we've got a 21st century city, but our transportation system with DART is more like the 19th century. Many times it'd be just faster just to walk than to wait on DART, which I think many people end up doing, then hope the bus catches up to them. So those are just huge components of what needs to happen. And by putting this toll road first and saying that's our priority, we miss out on opportunities. There have been some great ideas out there. Robbie Good, for example, came up with an idea of extending Riverfront further south into southern Dallas, going near I-45. And so that idea, improving the connectivity, working on the street grid would be a big help too. And all these would actually improve congestion because, as we've seen from the toll road's going to increase congestion on the roads outside of the core, and then the few roads it does help, you only gain 2 miles per hour faster on those roads than today. And so that's a big price tag for that, 1.5 billion in climbing. So the solution for transportation is Project Pegasus, DART that works, and Extend Riverfront.
Thank you. So, Angela, I want to talk about a little bit. George touched on this briefly, but so many of the residents we know in the southern sector, especially, don't own cars. So, what about the residents that don't own cars? What can we do to more effectively bring them the connectivity of society and provide them with opportunities and active jobs?
There we go. Thank you. I think it's interesting. The conversation about improving Southern Dallas through the toll road has really completely ignored folks who don't own cars, folks who use public transit to get to their jobs. And what's been frustrating too is, and George, you touched on this idea that if you do have a job in the medical district and you are coming from Southern Dallas, the concept behind the toll road is you're going to have to pay for the privilege of having a job in the medical district. And so instead of focusing on a toll road, it makes a lot more sense to focus on folks who don't own cars, who do rely on public transportation, like Scott said, to focus on DART, focus on improving DART. You know, Houston has taken a very proactive stance in redeveloping their public transit system. And what they're focused on is revamping their bus system. Because how many folks here have ever tried to get on a bus to get where you're going in Dallas? And was it as fast and as effective and efficient as you would have liked? No, it's not. And that's because we have an antiquated bus system, and the way we route things is based on just an old way of doing things. Houston is revising their system, and we need to take the same steps to reevaluate, to create more effective and efficient bus routes that are responsive to the people who use that system. But right now we're focusing all of our attention, our staff time, our money, political capital on a toll road that's going to make people get to work with a toll, or get to work more slowly via car on freeways, or rely on public transportation that has not provided them with the type of access to their jobs and been as efficient as we would like. So I think the answer is really focusing our attention on improving DART and improving public transit opportunities in Southern Dallas.
And while you're saying that, I'm thinking of George. I have many a days. I work in Deep Ellum and live in South Dallas. Have passed George on the DART and thought to offer him a ride, but you know he's he's literally like, who is the man with the afro? I know him. And so quite literally, this has happened often. And so George, with that being said, I know that you gave up your car recently, and I wanted you to talk about that experience and what it has taught you, indeed, about public transportation here in Dallas.
So I didn't give it away. What I've tried, what I'm working on is using it less, and it's a good thing I didn't give it away, because on the weekends it's usually an hour delay. You have to wait an hour for the next bus if you miss it. And so even though I live, if you take Southwest, I guess, going on Martin Luther King into Oak Cliff, right off the second exit off of the Cedar Crest Bridge, which is basically a half a mile away, it's still better for me to basically drive for this weekend. So that's what I had to do. I had to get in my car and drive over here. But I do try to get on the bus system as much as possible, because part of my work in community development started off providing direct services to low-income households. And I would sit there and complain or talk to people about, hey, yes, you have to get to a job interview up by North Park, and we're down here in South Dallas, and that commute's probably going to be an hour and a half to get there. But there's no excuse. Get you a bus pass and do it. Or I would make all these complaints about how you can make it if you get on the bus transportation, until I actually started doing it myself to get to my own job. And I started, man, oh my goodness, I have to plan 30 minutes or 45 minutes ahead to make appointments. And that's where I said, okay, I can't continue to tell people who are have limited access to things and mobility and all that. This is your best way of doing it if I'm not also willing to do it. And so that's the reason why I'm trying to use my car as less as possible.
Very good. And just to speak to that point before we go on to the next question, is Matt mentioned that I work for a literacy organization, and so many of our students, we provide GED and basic literacy service. So many of our students take public transportation to get to Lyft. And I walk to work. It's about a mile. And I actually saw one of our students, I'm trying to get on the bus and walk to class. And I think I beat her there, to be quite honest, on foot. It speaks to that, but it's so important. So when we're talking about literally people in our community that need services, public transportation is something that's missing to this conversation that should definitely be included. For the next question, Patrick, I'm going to lean on you. I want to know, as president of the Fair Park Merchants Association, what have you seen as the successes behind small business growth, and what are the remaining obstacles?
Well, in the South Dallas Fair Park area, what we're keenly concerned with is the perception of the area. We are finding that that's pretty much our biggest hurdle, and it's a very deep hurdle because it's an old hurdle. It's the difference between North and South Dallas, which has been, as long as I've been alive and before people of my time. And so even at the getting resources and, help from the city to do that, there's even more of a challenge there than, say, a North Dallas business. So you're going to get more pushback, if you will, trying to create a business in the southern sector than you will in the north. And, I mean, financial, bureaucratic, that whole thing. So that's pretty much the challenge. The success is it's a really tight-knit group. So once you're in, we do everything for you. We're all about doing business with each other and developing that mentality in the area, because we believe that a strong economic center is going to help the people, and especially if we're preaching a entrepreneurial mind to the youth instead of a go get a job mind, that will help because they form their own circles and they create their talents to, galvanize their own communities. And we've seen that that's pretty much the success is once something gets going, the community responds immediately with their time, with their money, if you're opening a store, we're going to buy it, that kind of thing. And I am a resident of South Dallas Fair Park area, so I'm actively involved in that process too, and a business owner in the area, so that's what I'm thinking.
Just to touch on this, as a resident in South Dallas, what are kind of your opinions on the toll road and what it would do for your community?
My only focus when it comes to pushing a road through a neighborhood is what happens to the neighborhood and the people in it. It seems as though this is historic, the railroad started with that, you push through a small community because it's either close to something that is necessary or a resource and push them out to create independent growth, not necessarily community growth. And that's what I'm concerned about. So in the area, that's what we talk about, but there's not a lot of talk about how to fix it. They just know it's coming, and that's where it kind of stops. And you're looking at a group that knows that it's coming, has seen it before, and knows that they're probably not going to be able to do much, but opportunities like this, where there's, people involved and excited about making some positive change, I think that needs to be what's expressed to the people where development is supposed to happen. I don't see a lot of that going on, like that grassroots. Go knock on somebody's door and tell them that there's a road coming, and they should probably have an opinion about it, and here's where they can talk about it. I think that needs to be done too. So that's what's going on in the area.
When we were coming here, it's like, oh yeah, we're going to Cornerstone Baptist Church. It used to be a grocery store, right? And it's right under the freeway. It's very easy to find, right? It's literally a church under a freeway. I mean, how ironic. And you have to think about when you're arriving here, right? I mean, did anyone think of that irony? It's just how ironic it is. What did a freeway literally in the middle of this community? What did it do to this community? And it's it's just interesting. And we have to think about it. And, we want another freeway. That So with that being said, Miguel, we want to talk about. I want to talk with you a little about education, and we obviously need job training programs to equip our residents, not only in the southern sector but in Dallas in general, with the skill sets they need to be qualified for employment. What are we doing to help prepare the next generation of our workforce?
So before I even get into that question is to build on this idea of transportation and what it really means, public transportation, what it really means for our community. There was a while back, it's probably about 2 years ago, there was a Facebook post, and someone had gone to a DART stop, a bus stop, and had found a piece of paper with times and connections to eventually this individual was going to the doctor. And it took this person, they had to be on time for every single one of these transitions, nearly 2 hours to get to the actual doctor and then go to the doctor, and then they had to reverse that to come back to where they lived. And when I think about justice, how do we look at that in our city and say we are doing a good job promoting justice for all of our citizens? So I just wanted to add that. That's stuck with me ever since. From an education standpoint, it all starts with education, right? And so some of the things that we know that we have to continue to work on in DISD, but in just education in general in our entire community, are things that we know are going to be long-term solutions to our issues. So what does that look like? Early childhood education. I think it's shameful that we have, I think the number's somewhere around 20 or 30,000 children in Dallas ISD that could be accessing early childhood education, but don't at the moment. Some of that rests on us. We don't have the facilities. Some of it rests on the state. They've cut our budget rather than adding to our budget. And then some of it rests on the community in general. For us to have we're now having an open and honest conversation about the merits of early childhood education and putting our money where we know the money needs to go. It's very likely, and I want to announce it to all of you, that in the near future, we may come to you for either a bond or something called a tax ratification election to put money into early childhood education in those facilities. That's one thing, because if we can get the kids earlier and get them all on the same playing field by third grade, their chances of success rise astronomically. So that's one thing. Another thing is to be realistic about our population, what it looks like in our urban core. By the year, I read The Economist the other day, and they project that by the year 2050, the number of Latino workers in the state of Texas will outnumber all other workers 3 to 1. In Dallas ISD, we have 161,000 students. 72% are Latino. 30 to 40% of those students don't speak a lick of English. So in Dallas ISD, we have to be real about what the population continues to look like and try to figure out, how do we have more bilingual educators? How do we continue to promote diversity within our system, where we're breaking down these old barriers between race and culture? The public school system should be seen as an opportunity to really make our urban core better. So early childhood education, bilingual education, but not just that. Schools of choice. Let's provide real choice to children today that don't have that. I used to teach at Marsh Middle School in North Dallas, and every day I would drive by Hockaday. And I remember having conversations with my young female students in my class, and they would say, Mr. Solis, how do we go to a school like Hockaday? And that was just seared into my mind for 2 reasons. Number one, because I knew the answer to that was, you have to make an extremely high amount of money or be lucky and get a scholarship to go. But the other reason is because I wanted them to believe in their own school system. So in Dallas ISD, what we're trying to do now is to expand schools of choice for children who deserve to be able to go, if they want to go, to an all-women's academy or a STEM, a science, technology, engineering, and mathematics academy. So we're beginning to expand that. But at the end of the day, I really believe this concept of concrete and sending opportunity outside of our core, it goes against the grain of what should make our city great, and that is revitalizing our core, bringing people back to the middle, breaking down barriers. You can do that through smart urban planning. You can do that through smart transportation. And I'm not sure we're there just yet, but I'm encouraged to see the people in this room who are putting everything they can into ensuring that that actually becomes a reality. I think that answers the question.
Hey, above and beyond. Thank you. And Scott, so you represent Southern Dallas. What are some city programs that have addressed housing challenges? Dallas is being dinged actually currently as we speak by the Supreme Court about what they're not doing for housing. So how is the city programs addressing the housing challenges, and then have they been successful, and what would make them more effective?
I'm vice chair of the housing committee of the city of Dallas, and so I can tell you now, the city council for nearly 4 years, our housing system is broke in the city of Dallas, particularly how the city addresses the issues. It's and this would even be post. Probably most of you are familiar with Walker. That was back in the 90s. There's a big called Walker Consent Decree, where the city of Dallas, the federal government found the city of Dallas conspired with the Dallas Housing Authority to place minorities and people of limited means in certain parts of the city. And so that came out of this big case, Walker Consent Decree. But since then, we've seen a lot of the same practices happen. We now have what I would call an alphabet soup at the housing. There's things called like LIHTC, low-income housing tax credit, 4%. If that's not your flavor, there's a low-income housing tax credit, 9%. There are these LURAs, there's Section 108, there's community block development grant programs for housing. And all these housing programs are just about spending federal money and your bond money, not really building communities. And the way the city's gone about it is they look for the places that have the cheapest dirt, which typically is the place furthest away from schools, furthest away from education, furthest away from the grocery store. That's where the dirt's the cheapest. Poor transportation choices, and they say on that piece of property, we're going to put something that will be only for low-income residents. And on this piece of property, we're going to say, for the next 40 years on this piece of property, it's called a deed restriction, nothing can happen to it but housing for low-income residents. And so what kind of chance do residents that live in this housing have? It's furthest away from jobs, it's furthest away from education, furthest away from grocery stores. And so that's been a big part of our housing program. The other part that's broken in some neighborhoods, the city of Dallas comes in, and there may be an apartment complex that's getting a little bit older. You know, things get older. And the city of Dallas says, well, we're going to give you some money to rehab it. But for the next 40 years, all this apartment complex can be is for low-income housing. No one else can live there. And it starts this vicious cycle of deed restrictions that eat up an entire community. Because if you have an apartment complex, you put apartment complex about 20 years. After 20 years, it starts to reach its economic usefulness. It starts to get old. And at that point, the maintenance goes up and up and up and up. It's just like if you live in an old house. Maintenance just increases. But in these places, the only residents that are allowed to live there are residents of low income. And so the amount of money that's paid that goes into the complex is fixed, and it goes down. Then you get this big gap between the deferred maintenance and what the residents can pay. In that gap, we all see it every day as blight. First, things don't get repaired. Then the programming disappears from the apartment complex. And then the trash isn't picked up around it. And then the landlord's not there anymore. And it just starts this vicious cycle. And that goes on all the time in the city of Dallas. And so our housing program hasn't met the needs that, believe it or not, now, city of Dallas, 60% of the population rents. We're down to 40% homeowners for the first time in our history. And things are just spiraling out of control. You wonder why. Is all the inputs we're putting in, all these inputs we put in are just to build more low-income housing in southern Dallas, away from jobs, away from public transportation, away from good schools. And so there's no choice in it. And that's why most recently you saw the city of Dallas was in trouble with the federal government for their program downtown, where money used to provide affordable housing downtown was actually being rerouted in a scheme to provide luxury apartments downtown that are renting for now up to $2 a square foot. to subsidize the development of them. And you see now there's a big case that's all the way up to the Supreme Court just about how we give out housing vouchers and where we choose to place the housing. It is resulting in a discriminatory pattern in this city, and it's not good for the city. Because everyone knows, I know many of you know someone who may be a grandparent, and their grandchild has decided not to live in southern Dallas. Part of the reason is because the housing's not available. You can go over the last decade and go look at Duncanville, DeSoto, Cedar Hill. We had a massive flight from southern Dallas to those suburbs. We built those suburbs in one decade, in part by not providing quality housing choices in the city of Dallas. One decade, we built up those suburbs. Well, we lost population. They doubled their population, and they doubled it with individuals with jobs. The story of southern Dallas from 2000 to 2010 was many individuals who obtained upward mobility and wanted a different choice in housing, different educational opportunities, different transportation choices, went to the suburbs. And so we have built our neighboring suburbs in the last decade. And that is an opportunity lost because all these federal funds, one goal I have if I get to be chair of housing, which will be up to our mayor, is we need to take all this money that's going to these apartments and we need to reroute it into single family housing in southern Dallas to stabilize our neighborhoods. And we've had that decision. We've had that choice that we could do. The obstacles to doing it are the large apartment builders here in the city of Dallas who have names that you'd all recognize and some that you wouldn't but make a lot of money from our housing department. We can reroute all this money into our single family neighborhoods and build single family houses that will attract back the middle class to stabilize southern Dallas. So we don't just keep building apartments and going in this endless cycle and wondering why nothing changes. And so that's going to be our big challenge coming up is many people don't believe in these housing deals, how much money the city gives away. The city can give away on a housing deal $4 or $5 million for apartments. And guess how much per door it walks down that we're subsidizing these large developers and apartment builders in southern Dallas building low-income housing projects. We subsidize them on the tune of $120,000, $150,000 a door for an apartment complex. That's enough to build someone a house. And so that's the choice we're making. We are lining the pockets of a certain part of our development community that wants to build low-income housing throughout southern Dallas at the expense of residents. And we subsidize many of these projects. Literally, each one is a house, the apartment. We're writing them a check for $150,000 to build one apartment unit. We could give that to a developer to build a house and just give the house away, and we'd be better off. That's how bad the housing situation's gotten here in the city of Dallas.
George, would like to talk about security in southern Dallas. What's been the impact of security in the zip codes, specifically 75210 and 75215?
Well, I can probably touch on multiple things that's been said, because when you brought up about the perception of crime and that being one of the hindrances with business development, there's some truth to that, because crime has actually been steadily decreasing in South Dallas Fair Park, specifically when it comes to crime. You wouldn't know it. But a part of that is because also the population has continuously decreased, right? Since 1970, it went from about 70, 80,000 to now it's about 21, 22,000, just within 2 zip codes. So, I mean, literally, as the population has been decreasing, so has probably the crime and all. But that's to this point of security. My neighborhood's very safe, but you wouldn't notice that based on how the street is kind of broken up. The sidewalks are pretty much now turned into grass lanes. I mean, there's this box style shopping mall that's pretty much vacant. You would assume that, oh my goodness, this is not a safe place. But everyone on my street know one another, and we look out for one another. So But to this point about Scott brought up about 60%. I didn't know it was 60% renter within the city of Dallas, because it's about 70%, a little bit over 70% renter in South Dallas Fair Park. And I would assume that of that 30% that are actually homeowners or resident owners, because I see so many vacant homes, and lots, I would say it's probably maybe another 10% of actually people who don't even live in that lot or that house in South Dallas Fair Park. So it's probably even less as it relates to people living in the neighborhood. And when you said about this idea of people almost flight, right? This middle class flight that's happened out of Southern Dallas. I don't know about Patrick, but for me as a child, I remember visiting, because I'm from Fort Worth, having moved to Dallas. But I remember as a child visiting relatives and grandparents, and people would talk about teachers, firemen, police officers, all living in Southern Dallas, Oak Cliff, South Dallas Fair Park. And that's not the case now. To what Scott was saying, that most of these projects and houses that have been built or apartment complex are low income. And so so this mixed income, this mixed and diverse of education attainment level in Oak Cliff to South Dallas is no longer there. And part of that can be solved by the city, right? Because I think about if you wanted to buy a lot right now in South Dallas Fair Park, based on the PD 595 special use permit, it's hard to build a house for upper middle class or middle class family or a single household, right? Because there's this permit that says this lot needs to be for low income, or this lot has to be used for some kind of grocery store. It's like, oh my goodness, how in the world are you going to bring in that grandchild who, just like myself, just graduated from SMU, who's making 60 or 70,000 a year? How are you going to actually allow them to build a house in a neighborhood that won't allow for that to happen, in a section or area that's been repurposed for that? Excuse me. So when it comes to security, it's a whole host of variables that have to be worked on just to, I guess, get the image or perception right of this place, Southern Dallas, being safe and secure for businesses, for someone to live, a family to live. Just a quick example. Every day when I'm serving people in the area, the question comes up, because a lot of them are renters, is, hey, I have the opportunity to take my voucher and move out of the neighborhood to go to DeSoto or Duncanville. And the whole idea of speaking about, hey, man, this is a great place to live. You know everyone on your street. You know this whole neighborhood. You're from this neighborhood. But then the question comes, well, the school down the street is not the best school for my child, or the house we're living in, I can barely access internet. In fact, the phone lines are horrible. And so all those come up with a family member when they're thinking about staying in Dallas, Southern Dallas for that matter, or taking and moving off somewhere else.
Angela, Lower Greenville has undergone a massive transformation in the last decade. Has that area of Dallas become safer, and how has the perception of safety impacted employment? How has it impacted employment in the small businesses that operate there?
With Lower Greenville, I think one of the things we've learned is that smart, smaller investments can have a dramatic impact on the security, the safety, the quality of life, and the property values of surrounding neighborhoods. We don't have to invest $500 million in a convention center hotel or over $100 million in a faux suspension bridge in order to create economic development and in order to create safer neighborhoods. You do that by smaller, smart investments. And Lower Greenville is a great example of that. For a decade, we were dealing with crime. We were dealing with broken streets, traffic, noise. And that was a result of pretty bad zoning that allowed a lot of bad bars to come in and operate on a 5-block strip built in the 1920s, intended to be a small neighborhood retail strip. surrounded by neighborhoods. Instead, it became a regional bar district. And what we saw were, just in the 2000s, we saw murders, assaults, public intoxication. We had $250,000 a year of city dollars spent on overtime for police to pay for them. And I would go down there with my husband on the weekends to try to work with neighbors to deal with the noise and other issues. And what we would see is like a SWAT team-like situation. We had so many of our police officers down there. Think about the waste of those resources. Just think about that. When they could be in our neighborhoods, instead they were babysitting drunks. And so what we did is we felt like although we didn't have tens of millions of dollars, we did have $1.5 million. And we stretched that. And what we did is we transformed 2 blocks of that area. We narrowed the street. We improved the sidewalks. The sidewalks were just impassable. We had head-in parking. We changed that to parallel parking. So we made our sidewalks much bigger. We put in the old-fashioned street lights that you've seen. We put in nice trash cans, great crosswalks. And guess what? And we put in really good zoning that got rid of the bad bars too. As a result of that small, smart investment, we reduced crime dramatically. But more than that, we've created a great neighborhood service area for the residents. We have a Trader Joe's grocery store down there now. We have terrific restaurants. I've seen things in the last couple of years that I've never seen on Lower Greenville. People walking their dogs. I've seen older couples walking, dads out pushing strollers. It is revitalized. And the reduction in crime, the improved quality of life did not result from throwing money at this problem. It came by bringing the neighborhood together and saying, what do you need? What do we need to do here? What is the problem? And I think if the city of Dallas focused its efforts, we focus so much. I cannot tell you the staff time and efforts that go into this toll road. And Scott can attest to this. It is remarkable. Imagine if we took that political will, that staff time, and invested it in these types of small, smart investments in our neighborhoods. We would transform our city, and that's what we need to bring to Southern Dallas.
Patrick, how has safety and the perception of safety impacted merchants in Fair Park?
It definitely prohibits a lot of people from coming. I'll use that word. The perception of crime, the perception of an unsafe neighborhood, and then the glorification of maybe certain break-in somewhere or in a major block is a lot of the times what we hear why people won't come down here. It takes a lot of effort to get somebody to want to come into the area and have, a positive attitude about it. When you say the South Dallas to most Dallas residents, especially for those who are from here, you get that, I call it the South Dallas face, like, you live there. Like, yeah, I do. That thing. And that goes into the business world too. They go, oh, well, won't I get broken into? Isn't there a lot of, drugs around the area? And it's like, I have stats. It's like, look, no, there's not. And they're still like, it's just the the perception of it. Like, who's coming to my business? And so, but it goes back into my point of the people that are there now, highly involved in that one thing. It's like, if we can change that, when it comes with the cityscape a little bit, but it's also things like we're out, last week, I think Wednesday, we did like a mass cleanup from like Fair Park all the way down to where, I guess it was like where 45 hits, right around that area, right over the highway. And, people started coming out and helping because oh, right, we should do this. It's like, but no one ever comes down and says we should do this. So I just believe that the perception, if that can change, which I do believe it can, the overall attitude of not only the people there, because remember, it's like, when you're in the area that is perceived as the bad area and no one is helping, you sort of believe it yourself. And so that attitude, it becomes like post-traumatic stress is what I said. It's like, it becomes like they begin to act on it. Like, well, I should throw my trash in the street because no one else cares. And this isn't a place to care about. And to the point of the Duncanville, when I was a kid, that was so out there to us. Like, even to go to like Plano was something crazy to do because, some other reasons, but it's so far and, but it's like, what's out there for you? And when we got back from college, like half the people I graduated with live in McKinney now. And it's like, what are you doing? And then they're like, no, it's cool now. It's like, it's not like, And it's like, well, what happened to Dallas being, we used to be arrogant about that. Like, we're from Dallas, not a suburb. We're EISD students. We all know our high schools. And when we go out and play ball, or I was in band. Yes, I was in band. When I played band, it was like, that was the attitude. Now it's like, no, I go to North Plano High. And it's like, how do your kids, what happened to the pride of where you're from? A lot of those Duncanville cats, they're from Oak Cliff, a lot of them. And Oak Cliff is now beginning, with the Bishop Arts District. Now they want to like, oh, I'm from Oak Cliff now. Like, you weren't saying that 3 years ago. Like, you should have been saying that 5 years ago and been there, that kind of thing. I don't want to get an attitude about it, but that's how I feel about Fair Park now. A lot of the Southern Dallas people, not a lot, but they moved to Duncanville, and now they see like Martin Luther King gets better, and they want to come hang out at Fair Park. But it's like, well, what's going on Fair? It's like, you're now interested in it for the wrong reason. You want the show. The community needs you to be in support of it revitalizing itself, it growing, and it becoming a center for new growth, like what Miguel said. Lincoln High School has a farming program, which I think just got canceled. Yeah, so it's like, well, why? Like, urban farming is something that could really improve that area. With all that space, all those empty buildings, you could put farms and everyone, have all the people there, become Dallas's farm community, but nixed. Why? The kids were excited, the people involved were excited. No one has ever said they didn't want that to happen. It's always been positive all the way, and then why did it get nixed? That kind of thing. And I believe it comes from that perception of it's not going to happen because it can't happen, because it won't happen, because it shouldn't happen. It's just compounded negativity over who knows how long. And so that perception, I believe, is if not the number one, at least in the top 3 reasons why a lot of this stuff isn't happening the way it should.
This next question I'm going to ask for everyone. We know that as we discuss what the North and the South doesn't have, and I'll start with Scott. If not a toll road, what can we bring to Southern Dallas to help improve the quality of life?
The biggest things coming up, I think it's Saturday, May 9th. Take your vote. We got an election coming up, so it's an important election. It's a big turnover. At least 6 seats will turn over, which is huge. And it's also interesting because this council will probably be together for 4 years. Many of you know on council, you get 4 terms. So the people who've been there the longest are the seniors, then we have juniors and sophomores and freshmen. For a lot of reasons, 1500 Marilla is like a high school, but that's a different discussion. Anyway, right now there's no juniors. We only have sophomores. We have the seniors who are rolling off and freshmen. So this next council will probably be together for 4 years. So it makes what's going to happen so important to get the correct counsel. Be involved in activities like this, and then go back to your neighborhoods and organize, and really talk to your elected representatives, because we could take all these different funding sources I mentioned earlier at the city of Dallas and just reroute them into single-family homes in Southern Dallas. We could change the way we do it. Right now, economic development in Southern Dallas there's a tax abatement given in the southwest corner of the city for some warehouses. There's some tax abatements given in the southeast corner of the city at the inland port. And then in between, your bond money goes to subsidizing grocery stores. I mean, this last year we did almost $3 million for a Save-A-Lot. I wrote him a $3 million check to build a Save-A-Lot. That is the economic development plan for Southern Dallas. And the remainder of the money goes into low-income housing tax credits to deed restrict land for 40 years so that can only be used for low-income housing. And the people who have been making a lot of money on this, the construction companies, the spec warehouse builders in the southeast, southwest corners of the city of Dallas, and then the people with the bonds. They make a fortune handling these bond programs and issuing these bonds for all these low-income housing tax credit deals. The syndication, the banks make quite a bit of money. So those are the people right now who are benefiting from our economic development program here in Southern Dallas. So that needs to change by putting all the residents first. So I'd say what you can do right now, talk to your friends, get them to get out there and vote on May 9th.
Does anyone else want to answer that question?
Okay. Well, the one thing I was thinking about is Fair Park. Right now, there's even a discussion coming from the park board as how to or how best to revitalize Fair Park. I mean, that right there in itself for Southern Dallas is this great jewel. Could really inject not only revitalizing the neighborhood, but could inject new economic engine right in the area. And so that's something that we definitely, those who are here today, need to be informed about, look into, get involved in. But then also I think about the forest itself, right? The Trinity Forest is that we do have this beautiful, I think the largest urban forest in the nation, in the country. And so the fact that we're thinking about, okay, how do we build a road right in the middle of all that makes no sense to me. But that's something that we need to keep our minds in. Is, okay, if we don't do a road, how can we still enhance this beautiful asset called the Trinity Forest? How can we create great green spaces and maybe even a lake? I mean, you got White Rock Lake in the northeastern side. How can we basically enhance the Trinity Forest, which is mostly in the southern sector, right here in southern Dallas? How do we enhance that without the road going down the middle of it? So those are the things I think about as right now assets.
So a few things on my end. When I was driving here, I got onto 345, and as I drove over, I don't think I've ever either seen this before or realized it before, but I was counting the tents underneath 345, and I thought, isn't that? I mean, that's kind of like it sums up when we talk about transportation and concrete and justice and economic opportunity, that I'm driving over on some concrete tents with homeless individuals in those tents. Continue. I know many of you in here are already, you know about 345 and you understand the conversation going on there, and I'm trying myself to learn that as much as I can. So continue to ask questions around that. But as I was driving, over 345, it's also a road that I take to then get eventually to where George and I first met, which is right down the street from Dunbar. We have a garden right there on Lego. And George and I have been working that garden for some time. I hadn't been as involved over the past couple of months because of my new job. But Dunbar is experiencing, though many people don't realize this, finally Steve Pickett from Channel 11 actually did a report on it 2 or 3 days ago. It is experiencing a phenomenal transformation. We are pumping more resources through this Imagine 2020 program into Dunbar. And that was tough to get those resources there, but we did it, and the kids are doing better. When you walk by Dunbar, though, you see all sorts of things that you realize our kids on Lego who have to walk to that school on a daily basis have to face. You have crumbling buildings. You've got, stray dogs that chase the kids. And so I think if you can do anything literally tomorrow to have a tangible impact on the future of our community, go visit Dunbar. Walk in and ask, how can I help? Can I volunteer to read? Can I put together a community event to support the school? We can do those things literally today. And so I ask you to be even more involved in Dallas ISD. We know we don't get everything right? The fact that I'm hearing about the Lincoln Garden, George and I had been talking about how do we make sure that Lincoln can garden. Now we're saying that the Lincoln Garden isn't going to exist anymore. Bring that to my attention so I can figure that out. I appreciate that. But get involved and stay in tune, because we know we can't be successful as a large urban district unless we have your support, your criticism, but ultimately, this idea of trying to work together to try to move our school system and our city forward.
Let me just point out that it was an entrepreneurial culinary pathway. So, I mean, it was just to your point about this business development and then also the fact that we're in a food desert. Southern Dallas is still considered a food desert despite a Walmart on 35 and Ledbetter and all this. We're still considered a food desert. And so this was a program. It is upsetting to hear, but to build up entrepreneurs. So not just, oh, you can become a chef, but no, you can actually start a business. And a part of the gardens that Miguel was talking about, there's a coalition in South Dallas Fair Park of about 9 garden community urban farms for the purpose of injecting food and produce into this culinary program. And I see Joe back here because with Urban Acres, and we were talking about the next step was how can we then build up from there and maybe create some storefronts to compete with these convenience stores who aren't practicing justly in providing good, healthy food, and start competing with them, providing our own produce and getting the children an opportunity to learn how to run a business locally. So that is a little, I'm glad you brought this up. I'm going to have to talk to Miguel after this.
We're going to work on that.
Okay. Yeah.
So, Angela, there's Clyde Warren Park, there's White Rock Lake, and part of the reason why the initial conversation about the Trinity conversation was so important was because of the opportunity it would give to really highlight a natural jewel in Southern Dallas. What can we do as far as revitalization in Southern Dallas that can provide the foundation for recreation? And what can we do to preserve the beauty of our natural assets for residents?
Touching on what George said earlier, we have an incredible asset that I think any city in the country would give their eye teeth for. We have preserved a forest in the heart of our city. We have a green belt that cuts through the heart of our city. I don't know of another city that has that type of natural asset with thousands of acres preserved for nature and recreation. So the idea that we would slice that through with up to 18 lanes of concrete is remarkable. It's remarkable to me. But this isn't just about recreation. Because let's look at Clyde Warren Park and what a great investment that has been. It was a great public-private partnership. And what we've seen resulting from that is not just our city coming together to enjoy recreation in the outdoors in ways I've never seen that happen before. I think it's amazing. We've also seen incredible economic development resulting from that park. The property values around there and the resulting tax base that were directly related to the creation of that park, the increase is incredible. And it is directly attributable to the city investing in a park. Who would have thought a park over a freeway would have that type of effect? In the same way, we can use our forest and our incredible greenbelt to create economic growth along the river. But we're not going to do that if we slice that through with an enormous road. It's not going to happen. I think it's interesting when folks talk about the economic development argument for the toll road. I don't get it, and here's why. This outmoded idea that if you build roads, you're going to create economic development, let's just say that's true. It's not, but let's just say it is. Most of this road, more than 2/3 of it, is inside a floodway. You cannot build restaurants and grocery stores and shops inside the floodway. It doesn't make any sense at all. What you can build inside this floodway and what you can create for dramatic economic development along the river is a park. And we have right now, today, sitting at the city, $40 million that is sitting there, that's been sitting there for 15 years, that could be invested in this park. Scott and I worked hard to build the Trinity Skyline Trail. That's 4.5 miles of trail down there. It was just a little over $6 million. Imagine what $40 million could get us down there. Access for the surrounding neighborhoods and for visitors to the park to really get to and enjoy this park like they cannot do today. $40 million. Do you know why that money is being held hostage? It's because it is intended to be used for the Trinity Toll Road. Now, that money is earmarked for the Trinity, so it can't go for streets or education or anything else, jobs, programs, nothing. It can only go within the Trinity corridor, but we can use it for the park. So what I would love to see us do is, instead of fixate again on this toll road and to think that it's going to be some type of economic generator, let's do what's proven. Let's be smart about our money. Let's invest that $40 million not on a toll road that's totally underfunded and as yet unapproved, but let's spend it on the park and make a real investment in southern Dallas, in the heart of our city.
That's good. Who here knew about that $40 million? Anybody? Okay. And what it had to be spent on. That's really interesting and compelling. And those are the questions that we need to be asking and taking and joining Scott at a few of these city council meetings to ask about. Wednesdays, right, at 10 a.m.? 9 a.m. Okay, don't be late. So Scott, speaking of which, what are some examples of existing city funding that has been ineffectively spent? And how can we redirect that in order to have a bigger impact?
Yeah.
So right, start small. Think, let's not make this editorial, but just a few things, right?
A few things would be all the money going to housing. Our housing money can be used for single-family housing or for apartments, particularly low-income housing. So why don't we spend some of it on single-family housing would be an example. Our economic development funds for Southern Dallas, typically we use it on tax abatements for projects that are practically in Lancaster, and the other ones are in Grand Prairie. So why don't we use our tax abatement money for programs that create jobs closer to the core where people need them? Those would be the big approaches. I would say then our community block development grants. We have way too many what are called these neighborhood improvement programs, neighborhood improvement zones. They're so big and the money has to be spread out so evenly. By the time the money hits a neighborhood, it's just a couple $1,000s and you can't buy anything with it. So we certainly do need to start concentrating our resources, particularly with our federal money, because then you can make a difference in a neighborhood rather than trying to spread it out throughout all of Southern Dallas and every neighborhood ends up with less than $1,000. It doesn't make any sense. But the big ones to make the changes are on our tax abatements, which are economic development funds. Spend those closer to transit-oriented developments, and don't spend them right all of it next to Lancaster and next to Grand Prairie, where the people at these places work in Lancaster and Grand Prairie, cross the line to come to a job in Dallas and take their paychecks home. Put the jobs in Southern Dallas, and then on all of our housing money, we need to stop spending 100% of our housing funds, which is tens of millions of dollars a year, on low-income housing projects in Southern Dallas. We need to spend that money on single-family neighborhoods and to help stabilize some of our great neighborhoods that we have.
George, hearing about all of these pockets of money and funding, how could this help Patrick and Fair Park, Miguel and DISD, Angela as an advocate for the Trinity River, and Southern Dallas residents in terms of quality of life?
Well, it sounds like that once there'd be more focus, right? More focus on putting the community first. Once you take these monies and reallocate them towards things that are successful, once you reallocate it towards training and education, one of the things that come to mind that going back to what we could do right now is probably go to city council. I don't want to step on toes, but ask what happened to about $1.5 million that's supposed to go towards training, hiring, and building capacity for construction companies and minority construction companies with the SM Wright project. The SM Wright project, last March of 2014, our councilwoman of District 7 spoke about how $2.5 million was going to go towards training and educating and then building capacity of minority companies. And just recently, around December of before 2015, it was said that only $1 million of that is actually going to go to a new construction company, an opportunity, SM Wright opportunity, for what they say is going to only probably hire about 20 local neighbors. So it went from about 2.5 million. Oh, we might be able to get 200 people from the neighborhood locally trained, and businesses, like I said, built in capacity. And now the person running that company said that we'll be lucky to get about 20 local neighbors hired. And once again, we now only have one company out of this whole quote unquote community benefit. And that was something that came up during that Michael Morris brought up as a success during the Senator West's breakfast conversation, was the fact that, oh, we're trying something new. We're doing these community benefit agreements and working with the neighborhood. And I thought to myself, I don't know what neighborhood he was talking about, because we're not seeing the money from that, and we're not going to see the money. So that's something that could be asked, is how in the world is it, if you're benefiting the community with these projects, with highways being built, to send people away to work in some other place where they eventually end up moving to because it's easier, how does that actually benefit the neighborhood right now where they're located? And that's something that hasn't been answered or addressed. So that's something we can do right away, is just ask that particular question.
I was at that same meeting and sat next to the mayor for City Hill, and he was all for the toll road and all for the new project and on 35, which of course he would be. It's going to get his people that live in Cedar Hill to Dallas for their jobs. So I'm glad you're, at least someone's happy, but it's not necessarily Dallas residents. Those are all of the questions that I have, but just wanted to point out before I open up the floor for you all to ask questions, is that it's not just about the toll road. This is about something that impacts our quality of life on a day-to-day basis. And so, thank you all for being here, and want to hear just a few questions from the audience for our panelists and anyone else that is here before I turn things over to Matt. Yes, sir. Can you stand so we can hear you? Okay.
The term regionalism has popped up a couple of times. Angela Hunt said it when she was referring to our regional park districts of Lower Greenville. There's in a lot of ways, Fair Park, a lot of the struggle around the Fair Park has been whether or not, or what it is. Is it a regional attraction to pull people in once a year for a massive event, or is it a community asset?
Victory Park is, I'm sorry, am I not talking loud enough? Anyways, Victory Park is often, was clearly designed originally to be a regional asset to bring people in. How does, the question I have is, how does this concept of regionalism, and I think this ties in with the plans for the toll road, how does this concept of Dallas, central Dallas and the urban core being a regional destination that people come to and then leave affect the communities in Dallas and the neighborhoods in Dallas? And how have the communities adapted to that? How should we adapt to that? Where do we go with this concept that Dallas has been built out to be a regional attraction?
I'll certainly try to address that. For me, the issue with regionalism comes up in two ways. The first one would be there's always a spectrum of individuals that interact with the city. One individual over here would be the one who lives and works in the city. To me, that's the most important person because they have daily, frequent interaction with the city. Then you have someone who just lives here. Maybe they work in another city. Then you have the commuter who comes in just for a job with less interaction. Then you get over here to the visitor, someone who just comes in infrequently for an event or a particular attraction. And then you have someone that just knows us from the television show Dallas over here and through the internet. And too often the city of Dallas, with its expenditures and what it tries to attract, focuses on the internet visitor, someone who knows us from the TV show, and then someone who just comes here for an event. And what we ought to be focusing on is you focus on the person who lives and works in the city, and you make your expenditures for that person. So it changes your expenditures. The person who lives and works in the city, they want a safe city. That's important. But then also when they get up in the morning, they go out on their street, they want to have no potholes. They want to have nice streets. And they want a high quality of life. The parks, rec centers, libraries, those types of expenditures are important to them. Once the pendulum swings over to the person who just visits us on the internet, if that's who we're trying to attract, then you just want these big faux suspension bridges, and you want a nice convention center hotel that we spend a lot of money on for them to visit. Those are all great things, but they don't handle the needs of the person who lives and works in the city, who we want to attract for, primarily it's a selfish reason for the city, for tax base reasons. Because when you have something happen like between the year 2000 and 2010, when our population only increases by 9,000 residents, 0.78%, average Texas population growth for a city was 20%. What does that mean to an aging city with increased deferred maintenance and infrastructure costs? That means that in that decade, your taxes went up 20%. And so our expenditures, we need to focus to attract the person that lives and works in the city, that spends their time, attract them, because then we can grow the pie rather than going through this vicious cycle. The only way to continue to bring about services is by increasing taxes. So for me, regionalism is that point. The other point that was mentioned is on data. Too often the city of Dallas presents itself with regional data. And as policymakers, we make decisions for our city, decisions that end at our city borders, with regional data. And regional data frequently is from the Council of Governments, which is a 16-county area for the city of Dallas. And so when we make decisions based on data for a 16-county area and pretend it's our data, oftentimes we have a lot of unintended consequences and we make mistakes. So for me, regionalism is those two things. One, it gets us away from our focus on the individual that lives and works in the city, who's the most important individual. And number two, frequently we use regional data instead of City of Dallas data, and that results in your council making bad decisions. So Angela had another point to make on that.
I couldn't agree more with you, Scott, about regional data. And I think the Trinity Toll Road, to me, is a perfect example of bad regionalism. I absolutely believe we have to work with our neighbors, but we've swung the pendulum too far. You know, when we have our mayor talking about being the mayor of DFW, I'm concerned, because he needs to be the mayor of Dallas. And the Trinity Toll Road exemplifies this regional approach because, to be clear, we are sacrificing our park. We are sacrificing it for the suburbs. We are sacrificing it to make it supposedly easier for them to get in from their jobs and to export our jobs from southern Dallas north. Make no mistake, that's what this is about. I get frustrated when I see that our northern suburbs are getting Toyota, that they're getting all of these plants and businesses and office buildings and State Farm and all these office parks going up north. That makes me mad. I'm not proud of that. And I don't think as a city we should be proud when our region grows at our expense. And when we start focusing on our neighborhoods, focusing on jobs here, and making less of an effort of making it easy for people to just bisect our city, to just travel through it, or just come here as a visitor. When we focus on our neighborhoods, that's when we create a healthy, vibrant city that we all want to live in.
I just want to point out the example of what happens when the pendulum swings too far towards regionalism, because and I don't know if we actually thanked Pastor Chris Simmons, who is the pastor of this church, for allowing us to do this, be here. But this is a great example of repurposing and treating, coming into the community and looking to revitalize, because as Amber said, this used to be one of our grocery stores for the neighborhood. But you think about right out here, if there's a unimproved land right underneath 45 where they park on Sundays as an overflow. And it's because it's not happenstance that happened. This highway was brought in to connect to what we call 345, as you were saying, to connect to 345, or rather connect to the North Central Expressway, right through what was a neighborhood, right? 175, which is being raised here eventually, what did the same thing on just a couple of blocks down, but it was all for the purpose of connecting people to get further and further north, and those who were moving further and further south. And it's completely devastated this neighborhood. And Chris, on the other hand, though, Pastor Chris has done so much to try to continue to keep the neighborhood connected, building apartment complex in the back, all would raise funds with his congregation of doing that, saying that we're going to try to stay together regardless. So when you try to focus too far towards regionalism, this highway is a great example of what happens. It can kill a neighborhood.
Years ago, we started the Grove South project, and we were talking about let's build all the businesses, grow businesses in the south. Now we're talking about let's put a road to get everybody out of the south. Let's put a toll road to get us out of the south. I mean, I don't know, that sounds like a flip flop or me. I mean, we don't have any malls in the south. I mean, you go down 75 or 45, tell me where there's a mall there. There's nothing there. Get prepared to hear about car jam. Most kids are not going to say, man, that's a nice car. I'd like to drive that Lexus. It's going to be my tonight. So get prepared. I told the reporter that burned up, I said, that's all I was going to do is put faith in that community. Faith. By driving those nice cars down to the 75217 zip code, which is ground zero for high school dropouts. Ground zero for high school dropouts. So you know what those ground zero kids, those dropout kids do in those communities? Drugs, jack people's cars. So bring those nice cars to the golf course. Bring them. We're going to hear bigger rides and problems. But my point was, like George said, big oxymoron. We're talking about building stuff in South Dallas, building economic development, but then we're going to build a road to get everybody out of it. So who's going to fill those jobs when we start building those? Who is going to fill those jobs? If we're going to try to get everybody out of it to go work in the north.
Well, I got a point to make, and I want to ask a question. I think what I'm hearing is that we're looking at social justice and economic development. We need to be in the pedestrian business. Because if you're driving in a car, you're sitting on your wallet. You're not spending anything. You're walking, you can pull your wallet out your back. If you a pedestrian, you're not even working unless you're a pedestrian. You have to be a pedestrian in order to be spending or making. And what I had the fortune of working on the Trinity Park project itself, and I had this wonderful task. I worked with the man from Central Park, New York, to find out what the park program projections would be, what the capacity would be for the Trinity Greenbelt area. Easily 350,000 people there on a 72-degree day like today. Easily. So those are pedestrians with money in their pocket. Or you have 100,000 people driving, not spending a nickel other than paying the toll in the car. So it seems to me, just from economics, that the park is a big generator for that. And I'm just going to say that point, because I think whenever it comes to decisions, Scott, and with others, when something gets brought up, where does the pedestrian fit in that question? Because I feel like there's too much in the driving business now. And, no city's worth its weight unless you walk it. I just think that's the way it should be. It's different than saying when everybody brought that up. Your point about fair parks out there, yeah, it's been overrun by too many cars. I mean, the population of South Dallas, if you look from I-30 all the way to West Dallas, in that area that we have on the traffic, I've heard, I can't say officially, but I've heard the population of people in Miami, more people in Cincinnati, more people in Kansas City. And if you think, like you said, if you have, no malls, imagine those cities without malls, grocery stores, and things. So we're highly underserved, and we're highly needed. Whatever we can do to get pedestrians first. And I know I'm saying on the other question, and to say, what can we do at city level side? What can we do? What can we do?
Elect the right people. Elect the right people.
Sure, yeah.
I guess some time to think about that. You know what else you do if you're walking? Is you're forced to know people. You're forced to talk to people. You're forced to build community, which makes a city great. People say, well, yeah, if you want to, you can, build nice bridges, or you can build a stadium for the Arlington Cowboys, and that's what's going to bring people there. But I can tell you this right now: if you make a great community, people will come visit your city because you have a great community. And you have people of all walks of life interacting with each other. If you have mixed primary use in short blocks, and you have people living closer to each other, you don't have to invest in more police. You know why? Because people self-police themselves. And so, it's this, I don't believe anyone here on this table believes that every single person is going to walk if we create more walkability. There's going to be some people that just decide to drive for whatever reason, but we shouldn't say that we don't want to make decisions because not everybody's going to walk, when we ultimately know walking and interacting is what's going to make this city better.
I was just going to add one thing that it's come to a couple of times. Part of the resentment sometimes for these big projects like the horse park and the golf course is what's known as this idea of proportional infrastructure spending. You look at this horse park, has got now about $20 million dropped into it. But has anyone been over to, was it Pemberton Hill Road and Elam right there? You don't even have sidewalks in the neighborhood. So, and you look at all these big projects that are expensive and attract visitors, and you go a few blocks away into the neighborhood they're supposed to help, and the neighborhoods don't have street lights still. Drainage is inadequate, and there's no sidewalks. So all the money isn't proportionally spent. It just all ends up going on the big project, and none of it reaches the neighborhoods.
I see your hands. I'm going to go here in the front and then to the back. We just have a few more minutes for questions, so we'll try to get everyone's questions answered. Go ahead, sir.
5 years ago, I sold one of my cars, and a one-car family about South Dallas, their car, don't even have cars. It's $7,000 to $8,000 on average in the United States to own and operate a vehicle. So 5 years, I saved $40,000. Now I have means to buy a car. I have a job that I work from home at, but I choose to ride my bicycle, and then there's another option that people have. Bicycle is a great way to get somewhere. You talk about the hourly or the 2-3 hours that you might take to get somewhere on a bus. Well, you take some time off when you do take the bus and the vehicle, in the bicycle or on the train. So I'd say put some of that money into the infrastructure. We have a 2011 bike plan that is still hardly gotten off the ground. I think there's over 200 miles of planned infrastructure on street and in trails, and we need more of that money to be spent on those particular things. Like Angela has always advocated, and Scott as well, protected bicycle lanes in the streets that are separate from the vehicles. That's when most of the people are going to get out on the bicycle. Not everybody's going to get on the bicycle. I understand that. I'm not the type of person that needs to be told when to ride a bicycle.
but a bicycle can help a lot, and it's only costs about maybe $100 to $500 a year to ride it.
And I'm going to take one more question.
There's one pilot program going on right now, which is actually the parks at Wynwood. The parks at Wynwood in the 1990s was rehabbed as a low land use restriction agreement, LIHTC project, and they put on all these deed restrictions on it. And they said, oh, we're going to fix these apartments up. They're going to be great for the next 40 or 50 years. By the time I got into office in 2011, the time since 1995, the apartments had really disintegrated and were no longer a decent and dignified place for people to live. So in a pilot program that we worked out with the Texas Department of Community Affairs, we're taking right now the existing apartments and we're rebuilding them on a denser, smaller footprint. And then the remaining land will be, the LoRa will be released and it'll go to the marketplace. So before we had 48 acres of post-World War II deed-restricted apartments that would stay that way for another 50 years. And now we're about to start construction of the third phase of Wynwood. These apartments are redone as a high-quality product, and they're only on 24 acres. And so that means we're going to release 24 acres to the market, and part of a conjunction with a plan where we the shopping center at Wynwood Village also, potentially. Which was and what made this plan unusual too is, believe it or not, the bank who was going to get the syndication on the tax credits for the redo of the apartments, I had them write the check for $120,000 to pay for the plan. And people said they're not going to do it. I said, yeah, they're going to make a fortune on syndicating the tax credits on rebuilding the apartments. If we challenge them and tell them they're going to have to do it, they'll do it, and they did. So right now, that's the only pilot program. There are other programs we've discussed where we could go to the state and ask for a vehicle, special purpose vehicle, where we could start to release the deed restrictions and return the apartments to the marketplace, certainly after they reach their economic viability of 20 years.
That was our last question, but I just want to let you all know that this isn't the end of the conversation. This is just the beginning. And this isn't a plan that's saying we're not going to build a toll road, so we're not going to do anything. That's not what's being said at all either. But we want to do something. And thank you all, and thanks to our panelists. Let's give them a round of applause for being here.
If you can call our Mayor Pro Tem Monica Alonso and tell her to use those $40 million for the surrounding neighborhood. Trinity Groves has got a lot of money from the city, and there's no improvements in the neighborhood. Ms. Alonso does not have a vested interest. She just moved into the neighborhood to run for office, and I think we should call her office and tell her to invest in her neighborhood.
She said she lived there since she was 11 years old.
No, ma'am. I've been there since I was born.
Okay, awesome. So I'm going to bring Matt up. We'll have some time to debrief after, but we want to be respectful of everyone's time. So I'm going to bring Matt up to conclude us. Thank you again.
I'm so happy you asked that. So moving forward, let's talk about the opportunity that we have. And actually, panelists are okay to stay there for this last piece. But let's actually talk about the opportunity we have and the importance of these elections. And I know we have some candidates here, and I want to recognize them. We have Dr. Juanita Wallace from District 7. We have Winnie Cannon, District 3. I know James White from District 10 was here earlier. Do we have any other candidates or any other representatives? Yes, sir. Thank you for being here. And so, as Scott mentioned earlier, we have 6 open seats for this election. Only one other time in our city's history have we had more, and that was in 2007 when we had 7 seats. To put that in context, it is so rare that incumbents lose their re-elections. And so these new 6 seats that we're going to have, as Scott mentioned, there's a good chance that this city hall is going to work together for 4 years. There's a good chance that those representatives are going to be there for 8. In the last 20 years, only 5 incumbents have lost re-election after over 100 races. And the fact is, Scott's responsible for 2 of those 5. We keep on saying that have this pie chart of like incumbents that have lost re-election to Scott's face for 40% of it, but no one will make that for me. So that's one way you can help, if you can help build that pie chart. But looking forward and this opportunity to actually impact Dallas, the time is now. I mean, that is our opportunity. You know, if we consider the fact that of the 25 largest cities in the country, Dallas ranks 24th in terms of voter turnout for mayoral elections. We were watching a special during the 50th anniversary of Selma, and they were saying how in 1965, 2.1% of African Americans were registered to vote in Selma. That was one of the reasons why they chose that to launch that voting rights movement. Well, in District 7, where Fair Park is, 2 years ago, 2% of people voted in that race. And so there is an opportunity. I mean, in that disillusionment, there's an opportunity to make a difference. We need to engage. We need to get involved. I mean, we talk about how, you know, this toll road debate has been going on since 1998. The truth is, the debate around what to do with the Trinity River has been happening for generations. In the early 1970s, they tried to turn the Trinity River into a canal. And there was a generation of activists that stepped up and they stopped that from happening. There was a documentary on PBS called Living with the Trinity that chronicled that fight. And actually, the filmmaker, Rob Tranchon, is here with us today, helping document this. But I think that idea that there are parallels between what's happened a generation ago and what's happening today remain. And so it's our time, it's our opportunity, this is our generation's chance to save the Trinity River. And so we're at a crossroads. It's incumbent upon us to make that difference. I'm going to leave you with this final quote, and then we'll talk about next steps to make that difference. Revitalizing the city has to start with the neighborhoods. I think that's true, but what I love about that quote is where it actually comes from. The full quote, which comes from Pierre Chaco, who's the assistant director of the city's Sustainable Development and Construction Department. This is a quote in the Dallas Morning News. "We don't have enough resources. Even if we spent our entire budget on proactive plans, it wouldn't be enough to solve all the problems we have. Waiting on City Hall isn't the best strategy to get things done in your neighborhood. A big part of revitalizing the city has to start with the neighborhoods, and the neighborhoods getting organized and coming to the city knowing what they want. Whenever the city approaches this issue, our biggest challenge is herding the cats." Well, the cats aren't just our elected officials. No offense, Scott. The cats are voters. I mean, this idea of civic engagement, it doesn't end when you get to the voting polls. That's when it begins. You know, May 9th are these elections. June 13th is a runoff. June 14th is when the hard work starts. That's when we have to turn out to City Hall, regardless of what happens or who's elected, and actually fight for those issues that not only affect our community, affect our neighborhoods, affect our city council districts, affect our city. I mean, over the next few years, we're going to determine the fate of the largest city or the largest river in our state. We need to save the Trinity. We need to take back that call to action and make it our own, which is why this idea of saving the Trinity, obviously people have talked about it before. Everyone remembers in 2007 how the pro toll roaders used that, save the Trinity, vote no. So does anyone here buy domains regularly? Yeah, me too. I check them out occasionally. Well, we saved up a lot of money and we bought SaveTheTrinity.com. You know how much it cost? $9. Because the pro toll roaders who had bought that and used that against this movement forgot to renew it. No means no. This is an opportunity for citizens to get involved, get engaged, mobilize other people around this issue. Because the truth is, we got a lot of great candidates running for office. But it's not just about voting for someone, it's about voting for something. In 4 weeks, people are going to the polls. In 9 weeks, people are going to be voting in these runoff races. Almost every single one of these races is going to a runoff. And the truth is, most people don't vote because they're not educated. They don't know enough about the candidates. But for the most part, people know where they stand on this issue. It's our opportunity to identify as many people as possible that care about the Trinity River, that want to make a difference, and then educate them about those candidates like Winnie, like Dr. Wallace, like Mr. Turkett, who are stepping up and trying to stop this from happening. Not just because we want to save the Trinity River, but because there are also ways in which we can get involved and make a difference and come up with new solutions that don't make the existing problems worse, which the toll road does. And so how can you get involved? How can you make a difference? 2 ways. First way, led by George, join the Jobs Initiative. Each of these issues, transportation, housing, education, justice, opportunity, business development, and security. We ask you to sign up. Krista Nightingale, would you please raise your hand? So behind you, my back left, Krista has a sheet of paper, and it's going to be, we ask you to give us your name. Everyone's signed in, so we have your address and all that jazz. Give us your name and let us know which issue area you'd like to work on. Over the next few weeks, George is going to work with other leaders in Southern Dallas who are experts in these fields, who are thought leaders, who have been working on programs that are in the community to come up with ways in which we can address each of these areas in a way that collectively represents a comprehensive approach to not just expanding the jobs in Southern Dallas, but bringing those jobs that currently aren't there. That's how you can get involved and help build solutions to address the very challenges that the toll road's making worse. We also want you to get involved in these races, though. 4 weeks away from these elections, there's an opportunity to make a huge difference. We're fortunate to have a lot of members from the Dallas Green Alliance here. George Battle's on the steering committee. We have a few other steering committee members. Brenda Marks, Ms. Homan, you're with the steering committee? Everyone's involved. There's a lot of people involved with the Dallas Green Alliance. They're a political action committee, and they're raising money to support candidates that are against the Trinity Toll Road. But where they need help is to actually launch a volunteer-based civic engagement effort to identify other voters who oppose the toll road and educating them about who they can vote for to help stop this from happening. And that's what Save the Trinity is going to do. That's that grassroots effort. That's that movement. And the beautiful thing is we don't have to recreate the wheel. There's so many people already involved in this. We're just going to organize it and channel it effectively. So 2 weeks from today is Earth Day, Texas. Happens at Fair Park. 60 to 70,000 people are going to be there. So between now and then, we're going to do 2 things on behalf of Save the Trinity. First is we're going to phone bank. For those of you who haven't worked in elections before and campaigns, this is an opportunity to not just identify voters based on who they support, but what they support. We're going to identify as many citizens in these competitive city council districts that oppose the toll road and educate them about who they need to support in order to stop it from happening. The truth is, we're really fortunate in some of these districts. In District 3, we've got a handful of candidates that are against the toll road. And so what we're doing is building up an infrastructure of support that we're going to have at our disposal regardless of who makes that runoff. Because come May 10th, no matter who wins and gets in that runoff, we all need to rally one another. Not behind someone, behind something. Saving our Trinity and coming up with a way that we're not going to waste $1.5 billion ruining one of our greatest natural treasures. That's how we're going to do this. So we're going to phone bank, and if you're interested in being a part of this effort, if you're interested in joining Save the Trinity, I encourage you to see Andrew, who's going to be in that corner, who's signing people up, and has phone bank sheets with him today. People that we've targeted, voters that voted in 2 in the last 3 municipal elections. These people are turning out. We need to identify where they stand so we can make sure they vote for the right thing, as well as the right person. And heading into Earth Day, Texas, we're going to make shirts for every one of you that want to be involved in this and we're going to storm that Earth Day, and we're going to use it to identify voters who are like-minded, educate them about which candidates they can support, and use that collection of data to actually make a difference in these races. Y'all, not very many people vote. It's sad, it's true, but there's an opportunity in that. We can impact these races if there's a few hundred votes in some of these districts. So please, coming out of here, I encourage you to join George, be a part of the Jobs Initiative. We're going to be putting together and developing this comprehensive proposal that we can give to Senator West and show him there are other ways to impact the quality of life in Southern Dallas beyond the Trinity Toll Road, which happens to make it worse. And join us with Save the Trinity. Help get involved in these races. Help save our river. Help save our city. Guys, thank you so much for being here. It means a lot. Thanks so much. Thank you, panelists. Appreciate it, y'all.
This is William, hopefully your favorite videographer from Two Hats Publishing. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like it, please leave comments below, or like, follow, or subscribe to us and get notices of all our videos. We love it, even when you call.